and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, we just have a few quick questions for him downtown. He'll be back real soon. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
That's pretty dark there, Scott.
Look, man, what kind of joke do you want me to make about this movie?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the ones where there's not going to be a ton of joking around, I think.
Yeah. This week on the show, over a month after the Oscars have aired and everyone's done talking about them and people have already started talking about the 2026 Oscars, we are here to finally finish our series covering all the Best Picture nominees from the 2025 Academy Awards. The final film of this series is the Brazilian film I'm Still Here. I think the shocking entry into our list of 10. On my list, this was not one that I figured would be on nominated for Best Picture, and I think a lot of the pundits that purport on this thing pretty regularly would agree with that. This was definitely, I think, was going to be a popular entry for the foreign film category, but for best picture was a surprise for sure.
Is there any insight that has been gleaned since then as to why exactly this movie was so successful on the campaign trail, as it were?
I think there was a very popular campaign for Fernanda Torres, the actress who kind of leads and owns the entire film. She did get nominated for Best Actress, and so I think there was a little bit that came along with that. I think the other thing is just the Oscars have become a much more international body lately. There's many more international members than there ever have been. They are becoming a much more global organization, and so they are much more interested in global pictures. And this was a very well received picture out of Brazil, and I think that just kind of helped elevate it to this point. Obviously, it did not win. I did it win foreign film? Probably should have looked this up before we started.
I don't know.
Let's look it up right now. Yeah, it did win Best International Film. So we don't call it foreign film anymore. It's Best International Feature Film. It did win for that. So that's international feature film's a really interesting category, Matt, because like basically what happens is every country can select one movie to represent them in this category, and then obviously you shortlist it from there. And then the nomination process works to get you down to the five, and then you pick your winner. But this movie, gosh. So we're going to talk about this movie, and then I think we're going to wrap up the episode today by kind of looking back on all 10 nominees. We talked about 9 of these over the past few months, and of course we talked about Dune 2, our 10th nominee, way back at the beginning of 2024. But so we're going to look at all 10 of these. We're going to rank them. We're going to talk about them one last time. And then I thought it would be a fun thing to do is once we've done that ranking process, Matt, we compare to last year, because we did this same series last year. And I'm just kind of curious what happens when we look at these 10 films that perhaps best represent the year in film compared to last year's 10 films. Which year was better? Was this a bad year for film, as everyone wanted to say it was? Or do we like these better than last year's movies? I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
But let's get into our main event first. Let's talk about I'm Still Here. Matt, what is this movie all about?
A woman married to a former politician during the military dictatorship in Brazil is forced to reinvent herself and chart a new course for her family after a violent and arbitrary act.
That is that's such a weird way to describe the events of this movie. I mean, yeah. I guess it's technically true, but
yeah. I mean, that almost is the perfect way to introduce the problem with the movie, I guess. It's weird. It's weird for me to even frame it that way, because it's like it's not really the film's fault. It's just like, hey, it's got all of the baggage that a biopic has to carry, and all of the baggage that like a true to life story about a horrible thing that happened has to carry. If there's one movie from last year that it is the most like, it would be Zone of Interest, where you're taking a horrible, sad, tragic, just awful thing that actually happened, including the details of the true life stories of certain individuals, and then you're making a movie out of it, and you're not supposed to feel good about any of this. Um, it's supposed to be sad and disturbing and upsetting and leave you with a feeling that the world is broken. And I think eh, there might be some. Okay, so the main reason we didn't cover it until last is because it wasn't available until recently.
Yeah.
But I can't help but feel like part of it on some level was also like we were avoiding taking our medicine because every other movie this year it's like, oh yeah, that sounds like a fun idea. That sounds like a fun. And it's like, no, nothing about this sounds fun.
Yeah.
This is a drag on purpose. Um, so like that being said, like it was incredibly well made. Like it's an incredibly effective, incredibly well made, incredibly well acted movie. I
Yeah.
have very few like negative points on any of that stuff. It's just like, man, not this is not going to be like a fun conversation between you and I.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm torn on this. So I think we should say this movie, written by Murilo Hauser and Heitor Lorenga, is based on a memoir by Marcelo Rubens Paeva, who is in the movie The Young Boy. So this is a family, husband and wife. They have 5 children, 4 girls, and a young son. He grows up to be a writer, a pretty well regarded writer in Brazil. And one of the things he writes is a memoir called "I'm Still Here" that basically goes over the events that occur in this movie. I think it's interesting. It's also directed by Walter Sias. I think it's interesting, Matt, that this is a memoir about Marcelo Paiva, the son, but it's a movie about the wife. It's a
Mhm.
movie about the Fernando Torres character, who Fernanda Torres, who's I forget. I had IMDb open, and I believe I closed it. Sorry, the character's name is Eunice, um,
Yeah.
and obviously have not read the memoir. My understanding of the memoir is that a lot of it is about the complicated relationship Marcelo had with his mother, complicated by many things, including the fact that her husband was disappeared, and she kind of kept that from her family for a very long time. But a lot of the focus of the memoir is on the two of them. The thing I did read is that the memoir starts kind of where the movie ends, with their mother suffering from Alzheimer's in the 2000s, barely able to remember thing, and then it kind of peels back the layers of what happened from there. But it does, like, this is a movie about Eunice. Look, I know how to speak a little bit of Spanish. I don't know any Portuguese, and there's some random parts in which Portuguese just pronounces Spanish words completely differently. So I'm mostly guessing. Um, but the movie is about her. The movie
Yeah.
is she is the center of the movie. She is everything circles around her. And so I was just kind of surprised to hear that this was a memoir not written by her,
Yeah.
written by her son, who isn't really featured in the film very much, actually.
Yeah, almost to the extent that it feels intentional, that he's maybe occasionally like a watchful presence, but he doesn't do or say anything because I think,
Yeah.
I haven't read the memoir either, obviously, but it's like when you're a little boy and all this horrible stuff is happening around you, it's not like you can do anything. You're just a witness to it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other one of the other complicated things I feel about this is, and I like, this is a weird thing that I'm just being completely transparent here. I have mentally moved on from the 2025 Oscars already because it was a month
Yeah.
ago, and we were supposed to do this episode, then we had to delay it, and then had to delay it for another reason, and so we were really supposed to do this episode 3 weeks ago. But here it is coming, and it feels like this thing that's just kind of hanging it out there. And so honestly, before I even pressed play on this movie, I kind of sat down and was like, I don't really want to do this anymore.
Uh-huh.
And so I just felt like at the beginning I wasn't tuned into this movie's wavelength at the beginning. I think the movie eventually won me over by the end, and then also the last half hour or so kind of turned me on it again. So I'm at this really confusing place where I think I'm with you, where you said at the beginning that this is a very incredibly well crafted film with a dynamite performance at the center of it. Like, I totally understand why she was nominated for Best Actress. and yet I'm feeling like it's not that I'm feeling nothing. It's just that I'm like, I don't know if I enjoyed any of this, and it's not just because it's not a movie meant to be enjoyed in that way.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I think the pacing is strange, like, just in terms of let's just say that you're just trying to tell this sad story and you don't really particularly care if your audience is, like, having a good time. There
Mhm.
is still a need to keep the story moving along just to
Yeah,
maintain interest, not to maintain entertainment, just to maintain interest.
sure.
And there were definitely big parts where I was, like, tuned out basically.
Yeah,
There were parts that were really riveting and like horrifying. I found the kind of not the very very beginning because I had a hard time getting into it, kind of like you did. Maybe for similar reasons, but maybe just because I wasn't sure whose character we were supposed to be following for a while.
mhm,
And I found that, and just the fact that it's in a foreign language is just another barrier there.
sure.
Which, but anyway, once I kind of attached to the characters, and then you know, he gets taken and then she gets taken and her daughter gets taken and she's being interrogated, and then the immediate aftermath of that was all just I kind of couldn't take my eyes off the screen during that whole section, which was
Totally.
I don't know how long that was, but it felt like a while.
Yeah.
I, I don't want to say that was the highlight because it's like, well, that was actually the most harrowing part, but like
No.
that was the part when I was most engaged with the movie and I thought it was working really well as a movie.
I mean, essentially, I think this is what the movie is attempting to do, and I actually think it succeeds at this, is the movie is attempting to talk about a history, a time of a incredibly violent, destructive, cruel military dictatorship, but it's trying to tell it from the perspective of a woman desperately trying to keep her family going,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so what it is a movie. It's a movie about the little mundane moments of life as a woman struggles to keep everything together as the world is destroyed around her, but we focus in on these little mundane moments of life, and then we have to see Eunice and her desperate attempt to keep up appearances.
Hmm.
Like the thing, I think the scene that I can't stop thinking about is she's just learned her husband's died, um, and but she's already promised the kids they have to go eat ice cream, and so she has to take the kids to go eat ice cream, and she's sitting there at the ice cream place. The kids are just like, this is just a family at ice cream, and she's just sitting there in shocked silence, just observing the happy families all around her. And you see this, like, the tear doesn't even fall because like she won't even let the tear fall from her eye. It just like wells in her eye and then just stops there because
Yeah.
God forbid we let the tear fall. And it's this really powerful moment, but I think the flip side of that is what it creates in a movie is a movie in which while things are happening, not much is happening. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, this is not a movie. I mean, this is interesting too because we are watching this movie. I candidly do not know a lot about the military dictatorship of Brazil in the 70s and 80s. Maybe you're a much more studious scholar of this period in history than I am,
No,
but I
not
didn't
my
know a lot
forte.
about it. But I think it's one of those things that everybody that lives in Brazil knows. Like, that's the thing about Rubens Paiva is probably everyone that's watching this movie in Brazil knows who this is
Hmm.
and knows that he died. And so like a lot of the movie plays, I think, from this perspective of, well, we all know the story of the Brazilian uh horrible military dictatorship, right? Well, here's something that happened during it. And I'm raising my hand like, well, no, I don't. And the movie's not really interested in teaching you any of that, right? It's not
Hmm.
like, this is not a film that's about the history of Brazil in the 70s and 80s. It's a film about a woman desperately trying to keep herself and her family going while that happens in the background, which is very effective if you know the history. If you like wanted to learn about the history, if you're like, oh, interesting, what happened there? Well, part of what happened there, by the way, is we helped sponsor a coup. Our bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like it feels weird to call that a complaint because I don't think it's a complaint. Like it's not the movie's fault. I'm a stupid American, right?
Mhm.
Um, and yet these are things that I couldn't help but feel while watching it.
Right. It's just very hard for us to use our normal toolkit to talk about this movie.
Yeah,
I'm sort of
yeah,
experiencing that as we're sitting here because much like Zone of Interest, except like Zone of Interest last year, it's a film about the Holocaust camp commandant,
hmm,
and like every American knows a lot about the Holocaust
yeah,
because of how we're educated, and we don't like you just said, we don't know anything about the historical context of this movie, um, and and this is just intentionally, very intentionally, a much smaller scale movie about like you said, one woman and her family. um there were a lot of really powerful emotional moments. We already mentioned a few of them in this conversation. I thought um you know it does a good job of emphasizing the evil of
yeah,
disappearing people basically, and not letting anyone know. Okay, so here's one way in which not knowing the story kind of, I don't want to. It's funny. I keep biting off my words because I don't want to say like it works in the movie's favor. It works really well. It's like what it really does is it just makes the horror of it hit harder. Is what I really mean. So
sure,
specifically, I didn't know for sure that he dies. Like you're pretty sure. You're like 95% sure that they disappeared him and he's dead. And you're kind of like they wouldn't have made this movie if the guy wasn't killed. Like that just wouldn't make sense. But also, because there's that 5% uncertainty, I felt like I was put in the same position as a movie viewer to like be very aligned with this character, where she also probably is pretty sure that her husband is dead.
yeah,
Pretty quickly, pretty sure that he's dead. But if you're not sure, that's just utterly horrible because you're like, well, I can't really move on. I can't just say he's dead, he's buried. It's tragic. I'm going to mourn him and I'm going to move on. So you're just stuck. And there's a lot of stuff like with the way that she deals with this with her kids, which is just agonizing because, and I think emphasizes and amplifies this because she can't just go to her kids and be like, okay, kids, this is horrible. This is the worst. This is the worst conversation we're ever going to have. But,
yeah,
your father's dead. She can't even do that. So it's just this suspended sentence lingering over all of their heads, over the whole family's heads. And there's this repeated motif where people, her older daughters will want to have conversations and she won't let them have those conversations around the younger kids. Um, and it actually made me wonder, like, what would I do in this situation? Like if I had some horrible news I had to tell my kids, but like I wasn't sure. It's like, well, you don't want to tell them that he's dead and then he's not dead, right?
yeah.
And I went back and forth in my head several times about like what would be the right thing to do here, just with respect to how do you handle kids, especially small children, in this situation. And I couldn't come up with an answer, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's the wrinkle of like, even when she does learn he is dead, of course, like she doesn't have the death certificate. Like no one, the government is still not acknowledging he's dead. She just learns it from a friend and a reporter. She's basically told we want to keep it up, like we don't know that we know he's dead. Like we
Hmm.
want to keep the charade going and continue to demand, to kind of force the government to move or blink on this. And so, I mean, I think that's kind of maybe the central reason why even after she does know, she still seems to keep it from the kids. She doesn't
Hmm.
tell them. Like we don't ever actually see a moment in the movie in which she says, "Okay, kids, yeah, your dad's dead." And in fact, there's a conversation between two of the kids as grown-ups later. It's like, when did you first really feel like dad wasn't coming back? And um for Marcelo, it's like after they've moved.
Hmm.
For his sister, it's that the act of moving. For Marcelo, it's much later when she starts selling his clothing away. But like, so even once she knew, she still felt like she couldn't tell them. And so it is ultimately a movie about a woman who has to carry this load completely alone.
Hmm.
And it's like it is kind of just just thinking that this is a real person and this is a thing that she had to do and things that she had to go through. And she went back to and while carrying this entire load, while taking care of this entire family by herself, she went back to school. She became a lawyer. She became like a activist and a rights lawyer for the indigenous people of Brazil. Like, she did all these amazing things in this life while also carrying this dead husband on her back and taking the entire grief and load of it without being able to share that with anyone ever,
Mhm.
including her own family. And that's horrifying and tragic and awful. And yeah, I mean, there are moments in this movie where, like, I think they incredibly capture like the just intense sadness of that, and the strength of her at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is one thing I wanted to ask is like, do you think the movie is inviting us to see fault in some of her choices? And so what I mean specifically is, you know, there's one way of watching this movie, and it's just like, here's this heroic woman, and we're just supposed to admire what a hero she was.
Yeah,
And then there's another way that I found myself thinking a few times where I was like, I don't know if that was the best way of handling that. And I'm not saying like, oh, this woman, she screwed up. She didn't handle this, you know, the worst situation ever, like in the most optimal possible way. It's just like, that's human. Like, it's human to be confronted with something utterly horrible and to just kind of fumble it, you know.
yeah,
I'm thinking there's a few moments like her daughter is trying to have a conversation, is trying to like get some information out of her, and she slaps her daughter in the face. And you know, there's other times when it's like she's so like locked down on the information, and then like you just mentioned that like the children were never told that their father's dead.
yeah,
And I can't help but see that as just personally a choice where it's like, at some point you have to help your children grieve. And I think part of it is that she never really um I don't know. I don't know what the right term is. Like, I don't know. I I know she rationally accepted it, but it's almost like she never quite emotionally accepted it, or something. I think this is at least sort of tone wise, vibe wise, supported by the fact that, you know, at the very end of the movie, she's sitting there with advanced Alzheimer's, totally unresponsive, and then this thing comes on the TV and it shows her husband's face, and her you know, her face kind of wakes up,
yeah,
and you see the sadness in her eyes. Um, and it's like, yeah, she never got. Uh, she's still stuck in this.
yeah,
It never stopped being just as salient as it was the day after they took him for her.
yeah. I mean, I think so. I do. I mean, I think this is perhaps, like, again, I have not read the memoir, but like from everything I have read about the memoir, this is a major point of why Marcelo Rubens Paiva is writing this thing, is that, like, he has this very complicated relationship with his mother, because for many reasons, because of the decision she made to kind of shoulder this by herself and not let her kids in on any of these things. And I feel like, if I'm going to call it an error, I don't know if I want to go that far, but the choice of the movie to center it so directly on Eunice and like have the movie just be her the whole time, I think maybe it allows you to not really dive into those ideas, because I do feel them on the edges of the film, right? I do feel exactly what you're talking about. I feel like these constant choices to, like, really not even your eldest daughter. You're not even going to let your eldest daughter, like, I understand not wanting to bother the children with this, or but like, eh, but the other thing is, like, you're clearly emotionally devastated. Like,
Mhm.
you're doing a good job of holding up this, but like, people are very empathic and they can like sense and feel. Like, you probably realize this with your kids, when you're like stressed out or tense or anxious or bothered by something that even has nothing to do with your children. It is kind of incredible the way your kids will react to that, without you even being really aware of it until you kind of notice the behavior change in them.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, you've just like detected some sort of thing in the air and it's changing your behavior, it's changing your attitude, it's impacting your emotions. And like, that's the thing where I was like, you're fucking up your kids a little bit by choosing to do this. And it's like, it's not that like your kids wouldn't be fucked up a little bit by the fact that their father was disappeared and murdered by the government. Like, yes, that is going to be a traumatic event for any person that's going to affect them for their entire life. But yeah, like she held the not knowing from them for longer than she had the not knowing. Like,
Yeah.
it's like she talks at the end in the speech when she finally gets the death certificate about like what destruction the not knowing can cause, like what it does to you emotionally. And I'm like, yeah, but didn't you kind of do that to your kids a little bit
Yeah.
here? um and I guess my complaint would be, I don't know if the movie really is introspective enough about that particular thing.
Yeah, like it's definitely in there. I don't think I think
Yeah.
it's telling that we didn't really talk about this beforehand, and yet we both noticed the same thing, which is that um, she is uncommunicative to a fault, you know, and like you said, not as good at hiding her emotions maybe as she thinks she is.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of a generational thing, perhaps a
Sure.
cultural thing. Not that I know
Sure.
anything about the culture of Brazil, that like you're just going to have a stiff upper lip and you're going to hold it all in.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's just a mistake. I don't even feel like it's like, oh, you know, my millennial culture tells me. It's like, no, it's just what you said. Like your kids pick up on your emotional state. Everyone around you up on your emotional state. Actually, you're much better off. I've personally found like you shouldn't burden your children with all of your shit that's happening. But I have found personally that it's way better for me if I'm clearly in a horrible mood just to be like, "Oh man, I'm in a horrible mood, guys."
Yeah.
And like just I don't have to tell them why. I don't have to tell them what happened. Um just acknowledging it really clears the air and it enables everyone, you know, then they get to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, daddy." And then we just
Yeah.
move on. Like it's like and that just seems like such an obvious solution to a problem that apparently everyone born between like you know, an- antiquity and about 1980 seems to have burdened themselves with
Yeah.
for some reason.
I do think
Um,
it's a particular like the responsibilities of the mother thing, that they have to shoulder all this stuff and like can't like
mhm,
being a good mother means not bothering your kids with any of this stuff. I mean, being a good parent in general, but mother specifically, and and just the complication that creates.
mhm,
Um, I mean, like,
right.
look, I don't want to be clear here. Like, I'm not coming at this from a place of judgment, right? Like, I do think also one of the reasons she chooses to do this is because she has this incredibly fair fear that especially her eldest daughters will get involved in the same kind of thing her father was involved in, or her husband was involved in rather, and then the same fate will befall them. Like if you bring like that's like the constant thing with the eldest daughter. Part of the reasons they send her away to London is because they're like terrified that she's right at the age where she's going to really get into like student politics and like really get into this stuff. And we see her; she has this curiosity. She's sitting there next to her father when her father is meeting with his friends and talking about these injustices and things like that, and that there's just really this feeling that she could get pulled into this, um, and she's terrified of that fact. She's
Mhm,
terrified of losing anyone else. She she wants to keep the family as normal as they possibly can. She wants to show this normal life. Like that is what this movie does a really fantastic job at just building these scenes that are just depicting like what life is, just like normal everyday mundane life. We go to the beach, we go hang out, like we have got this great property we want to build a great big house on. We're all going to go there and like we're actually building the house, like we are building the house, because apparently that's just a thing that people did.
mhm.
They just built their own houses. um
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting aspect of the movie is it actually spends a lot of its runtime in sort of just these idyllic sequences of how amazing it is to live in Brazil, and then that's contrasted with like the horrible stuff that the characters are going through, obviously. But
mhm.
you know, we said at the top of the episode, like it's just a very beautifully shot film. Like it's just beautiful. Like if you watched it with the subtitles off, you, you'd probably have a totally and you weren't paying attention to what was happening. Like it's
Yeah.
just a bunch of beautiful places and beautiful people and sun and ocean, and it looks lovely, and I feel like
Yeah.
that underlines and creates a sense of contrast and emphasizes the horror in an interesting way, or maybe even normalizes the horror in an interesting. So let me take another swing at that, because this is something I was thinking about quite a bit. Um, I often find that, like, historical dramas, they inevitably overly dramatize their subject matter,
Hmm.
because it's like, well, you gotta make it a story and you gotta make it poignant and
Yeah.
you gotta move the viewer. And as a consequence of this, I feel like they always heighten the emotionality of everything that's happening, to the point where it's like, no, that's just not what it that's just not what it was like. And at first I kind of had that same gripe with this movie. And I wasn't even really going to mention it, because I have the same gripe with essentially every historical drama, where it's just like, yeah, like people just would like, if you're afraid of like your government, you don't emote that in a way that's it's just part of your life. You wake up feeling that and you go to bed feeling that.
Hmm.
It's not there's not a scene, there's no scenes for that, it's just your life, right?
Yeah.
and eh, and at first I had the same gripe about this movie, and then kind of as the movie went on and it just became almost this like intentionally monotonous grinding of like scene after scene, where she's not finding out where her husband is, and
Yeah.
people are kind of scaring her, and her dog gets killed, and she's having to deal with journalists, and just like the repetitiveness of it became mundane. It like became boring in a
Yeah.
way that I feel was intentional. Like, this wasn't the movie failing to be a good movie. This was actually just, yes, you have captured the mundanity and grinding meaninglessness of this continued suffering
Yeah.
better than I think most movies that try to do stuff like this manage.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right, because like, what is the truth of living under fascism, right?
Mhm.
Well, the truth of living under fascism is you pretty much just live your life, but also you're just kind of scared all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, and that's a lot of what this movie shows, is a lot of just like, you've got children, you have to try to give your children a good life, you have to try to make them happy, you have to try to have fun, but also there's these military cars driving in the background, and also there's this these people that have just been sitting in a car in front of your house for the past year, and they're just always there. They're always there. They're always tapping your phones. They're just always this presence in your life constantly. You always have to kind of watch what you say and do, and how you're being perceived, and yet you also have to just live your life. And so yeah, it is this kind of very mundane, like, to where I love that you like, where even the fear itself gets kind of boring,
Mhm.
because it's just become such a part of existence that um yeah,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, and I thought the movie, like, after the initial dramatic part where people are literally being kidnapped and tortured,
yeah,
it did capture the grinding nature of it.
yeah. Because I mean, like, what is the story of this event, right? The story of this event is they came and took him away, they murdered him, and then literally nothing happens,
Mhm.
because that's it. And
Yeah,
then eventually the government falls and democracy is restored, and finally 25 years later we at least get acknowledgement of his death and the government taking responsibility for it. Um,
yeah,
but
Y-
that's
it-
it.
yeah, and no one was prosecuted for it.
Sure, of course, yeah.
This is more of the interesting, like, causing me to ask questions of myself, and ask what I'm meant to think about this, or just what do I think about this, maybe.
Yeah.
Because the idea that, this horrible injustice happens to you, and then you spend the whole rest of your life, essentially, the whole rest of your life is about this injustice, and you never get justice.
Yeah.
You never get satisfaction. You barely even get an answer. Um, and part of me sees this is the split. Part of me sees that as incredibly noble and touching, and deeply relatable and understandable. But part of me just wants to be like, the best revenge is living well. Like, mourn your husband and move on, and try to have a good life with your family. And again, I hear that coming out of my mouth, and it sounds like I'm judging this woman who went through this horrible ordeal.
Hmm.
That's not the intent. The intent is just to almost use this as a tool for introspection and
Sure.
and thinking about humanity, and be like, I don't know which one. Like, it, what do I really think about this? I feel both ways. I feel both of those ways at the same
Yeah.
time. And it's strange, actually.
It's an interesting point because, like, I mean, it's objectively true that she did also like become a human rights advocate, right? Like
Hmm.
that is stated in the film, and sort of shown. We mostly learn about it in a title card. We get a little bit of it from the movie itself, um, and it's because of these events that she became so into injustices and helping people that are trod on by the government. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's also obviously clear that a huge chunk of her life has been this and is always this. Like that moment in 1996 when she's got the death certificate and is just going through the photo album that she's been maintaining for the last 25 years, that has every clipping, everything, every part of this long arduous process from the moment he was arrested to the moment he got the death certificate. And it's like she puts it in there and then she closes it, and it's like, okay, that's that.
Hmm.
But like, what did we do there
Yeah.
actually?
Yeah, no, I think we're meant to. I honestly, I don't think we're off base. The fact that we showed the scene when she gets the death certificate. This is a very intentional choice to have this scene where
Hmm.
her and her son and her daughter go to get the death certificate, and her reaction is relief. She's smiling. She's like crying and smiling, and I think the viewer, is somewhat put off by that.
Yeah.
I don't I like I don't think I'm having an unusual reaction in saying, like, in pointing out that she's having an unusual reaction. But the movie Lampshades that directly
Yeah.
says, I know it seems unusual that I would be laughing and smiling in a situation like this, but there's a huge relief to just finally having it over and done with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that in and of itself is horribly sad, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm really enjoying this conversation because, coming into this, I kind of even prefaced this in my little introductory part on this. I really was vibing with the movie until we did the 25 years later part.
Hmm.
That basically takes up the last 30 minutes of the film is we jump forward in time, and that kind of lost me because what I was loving about the movie is just how closed and small and focused on this woman and just what she was going through and how she's making it through the day to day of these moments, and I feel like the movie just staying in there and just being almost like a real time, like with her through every bit of this thing, was the movie operating at its best level. And then when we push to 25 years later, we pull back from that so far that I'm like, okay, I've kind of lost what we're even doing here at that point. Then, like, what is this actually giving us now? And what I'm realizing is what it's giving us is exactly the direction that this conversation has gone, by allowing us to jump forward in time for 2.5 decades and allowing us to see what this woman's life has become, both the good and the bad. It does allow us to maybe get a window into these exact ideas, this exact conversation, this exact thing. I think one of the things that's interesting is in the 1996 part, we see her and her two youngest children, right?
Hmm.
Um, we don't see the eldest children, the ones that she kind of sparred with the most about this whole thing. Now they kind of talk about them as if there is still standing relationship there, and they're much older, they've got their own lives, whatever, etc., etc., etc. But I do think that's an interesting choice, that like she chose to do this to protect the youngest members of her family, and now in this moment, the eldest members of her family are missing from the scene.
Mhm.
And maybe it's because they still harbor some resentment towards her for those choices. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the true history of this thing. All we're operating on is what the movie is showing us and what it's not showing us.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like that's subtextually there that she continually has this tension with her older daughters
Yeah,
that I think for much of the movie you think like, oh, is this, is this that thing where we're building toward the big cathartic moment where they have the screaming match that they've been building toward, and then they break down crying and embrace, and there's a moment of healing.
they never get that. Yeah,
Never get that. Never, no, it's much more like what you said, where she, for better or worse, her style in managing this crisis is just tight lips, stiff, stiff upper lip. I don't know. I'm using all these lip phrases, um, and non communicative. We're not going to talk about it, and essentially leaving them to deal with it on their own.
yeah,
Um, and I think she's, yeah, like you said a minute ago, she's terrified that the state is going to come back and take her or take one of her kids,
yeah.
or um, they already took her and her daughter once. They could easily do the same exact thing again. They have absolute power here.
Hmm.
If anything, for some amount of the movie, I was like, why don't they just get the hell out? Like get out of. And then I was like, I guess you can't just like leave a country if it's your country. Where
Yeah,
where are you gonna go? But I did think that several times during the part when there are like people outside of her house. I'm like, I would be trying really hard to see what other countries I could escape to just not
yeah,
have these people breathing down my neck all the time. Um, and maybe she did try that, and maybe it just didn't work out because you don't
sure.
always have that option.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like one. This is something that everyone that's listening to this already knows, but it is nice when these movies kind of just serve as great reminders to this central idea that we the people of existence have handed off this incredible amount of power to the governments that we live under, and just the absolute like we convince ourselves that we live under these ideas of the rule of law and order and these things, and people can't just do whatever they want, they can't get away with this kind of stuff, and then just see just how quickly that can crumble and just not be the case anymore.
Hmm.
Is often terrifying. Like, like we uh, we like to think we're safe and in control of our lives, and just Jesus.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
No, everything can go really bad really fast. That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. I mean, like, hell, Rubens was a politician. He was a congressman, or I forget exactly the Brazilian equivalent of this, but he was in the government. He worked for the government, and then had to flee the country when the coup happened and the military took over.
Hmm.
He eventually came back to the country. Probably shouldn't have, in
Hmm.
retrospect. But yeah, I mean, this is terrifying stuff. This is absolutely terrifying stuff, and it can
Yeah.
happen anywhere, at any moment, ever. It's like, the older I get, you kind of see through the structural mores of life
Hmm.
that you think are keeping you safe and comfortable and all these things, and it's like, oh wait, all this is like paper.
Yeah.
It's a house of cards that could easily collapse at any moment.
Yeah. All the polite fictions
Yeah,
that we say,
yeah,
no, it's definitely a lot more fragile than it
yeah.
looks.
Like, how can a government just take a person and then just say they didn't take him? Like,
Yeah.
that's what happens here. They arrest him, and then they just say, "Well, yeah, we took him in for questioning, and then we let him go." It's like,
Hmm.
"Well, no, you didn't." It's like, "Oh, really? How do you prove it?"
Yeah. There's a huge amount of frustration that I think is intentionally cultivated where like all like they do this whole rigmarole in order to just get like, I forget exactly, but it's basically like we just have habeas corpus is the legal term for this, but basically they're just like, yeah, we just can prove that they arrested him. We can prove that much.
Hmm.
And it's like there's a whole part of the movie where that like that's all they're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
and it's almost farcical because it's like, so what? It's a military dictatorship. Like you're lawyering meaningless bullshit is not going to have any effect here. But at the same time, it's all you can do. So
Right. Yeah.
I see why you're bothering to do it. Obviously, but
Yeah,
it's
because the dictatorship is still operating under this idea that they live under the rule of law and they
mhm,
can't just do whatever they want. They like there's this facade of the idea that there is policy and like we are following law and decency and all these things. And so yeah, you go through the rigmarole of the stuff, but it's all bullshit. It doesn't
right.
matter. It's like, yeah, we'll take your paper and whatever. And it's so funny, like the smoking gun, the thing that gets her so excited is this other woman that was arrested knows he was there with her. I didn't see what happened to him, but like I heard him say his name out loud, and
Mm,
you're just thinking to yourself, "Is like that's not gonna fucking matter." Like how, like the testimony of one other person under suspicion of being a communist, like is gonna make the government go like, "Up, you got us.
yeah,
You did it. Wow." But
right.
like you said, that's all they have. That's all they have. And so yeah,
Yeah, just this sense of incredible frustration from the ineffectuality, but also like there's nothing else you can do other than ineffectually
yeah.
tr- just keep trying. I wish I did know more about the history of this because apparently they're no longer under a military dictatorship. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean,
I
I
don't
think
know
what they
very
said in the
much.
movie of the new Constitution of 1984. So I think the dictatorship crumbled in the 80s. All I know is that it happened, um, and the United States supported it
Uh huh.
as part of our communism bad moves during the Cold War. Good job, us.
Yeah, not one of our greatest time
No,
periods.
no, certainly not. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I would like to know. Like that's like, you know, that's the type of thing where it's like this is not the movie for you if you're like, I would like to learn more about this military dictatorship. It's like, well, you're not really gonna get that here.
Yeah, it's the movie's almost actively disinterested in giving us any like names or anything like that
Hmm.
where you could walk away from it and feel like there was a face, you know, to the opposition. It's just like a bunch of soldiers that we see, it,
Yeah.
interchangeable soldiers, and one guy who says that he's a parapsychologist, which didn't know what to do with that.
It's interesting that like one of the only other Brazilian films I've seen is the film City of God,
Hmm.
um, which is I think it takes place at about this time. I think it's the 1960s and 70s. Um, but I didn't even like think about that while watching this movie. I was like, oh yeah.
Hmm.
Um, it's obviously like a very different movie. It's like um, it's about gangs and organized crime and things like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but still, it's a good movie. Man, I kind of want to go to Brazil. I mean, I know Brazil like has a lot of problems, but holy crap, that beach they lived on was beautiful.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's got like basically the entire Amazon rainforest is in Brazil. So if
Yeah,
you ever want to go see the Amazon, which I would like to see the Amazon.
sure. Before they cut it all down.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go to Brazil.
Okay,
Kingslingers Live, Brazil,
meet you there.
Rio.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too bad actually.
Do you ever this is going to be the most random pull ever, but this is my fun Brazil factoid. Every time I see something about Brazil, I think about the movie I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
I have not seen this movie.
So, and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is the sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Uh-huh.
One of those '90s horror films that was birthed out of the popularity of Scream.
Uh-huh.
And in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, um, our main characters win a special trip to the Bahamas. That is all. I'm going to spoil this fucking 20-year-old movie for you. I don't think you care.
Please.
25-year-old movie. They win a trip to the Bahamas, and turns out the trip to the Bahamas was all a ruse in order to get the people responsible for killing the bad guy in the first one. It's like his son, and he's back for revenge to kill him in the second one. And the way he does it is he sets up they win a radio contest, and the contest is what is the capital of Brazil, and they go Rio, baby, and then they win. And the little asshole that I was back in high school when I saw this movie was like, the capital of Brazil is not Rio de Janeiro. The capital of Brazil is Brasilia. And I was just like, haha, this movie is stupid. They made a dumb mistake. No. Turns out that is a plot point, because it's revealed later when they tell someone down at the hotel they're staying at how they got down here. He's like, I think it's right when he's dying, where he's like, Brasilia, or something so stupid. So this is my Brazil story. I'm sorry I went on this tangent, but it is a plot point of the movie I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, that the capital of Brazil is not Rio de Janeiro, which everyone thinks it is. It's not.
Great. And with that completely inappropriate segue, let's wrap up our conversation of I'm Still Here.
Yeah. I thought we were done. I thought we were going to move on.
No, we were. No. I just that was a fantastic end note. Is what I mean to say.
There you go.
All right.
I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
I still know what you did last summer. Yeah.
Doof. All right, Matt. That's it. That's the Best Picture nominees for 2025. I mean, okay. This is they were movies that came out in 2024, but the Oscars happened in 25. I still don't know when you say Best Picture winner 1999, are you saying Best Picture winner the movies that came out in 1999, or are you saying Best Picture winner of the Academy Awards that aired in the year 1999? I still don't know what the correct one is. I lean towards when the movie came out, not when the Oscars happened, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I always use it to refer to the year the movie came out, until, of course, you're having a conversation about this year's Oscars, and then you're like, we're watching the 2025 Oscars, but we're clearly talking about 2024 movies.
Yeah. Okay, so the Academy Award nominees for Best Picture from 2024 are, a reminder of all the movies we've talked about: I'm Still Here, A Complete Unknown, The Brutalist, Nickel Boys, The Substance, Anora, which won Best Picture, Conclave, Emilia Perez, Wicked, and of course, Dune 2, the only one we didn't talk about as part of this series, and that's merely because we talked about that movie already at the beginning of last year when we saw it. Matt, now we have the difficult task of ranking these.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be hard, but I think the beginning is going to be easy. So I'm just going to highlight a movie, and I'm going to put it at number 10.
Right.
And I'm going to just see, what do you think about my choice for what did I put at number 10?
Yeah. Let the record show that Scott and I telepathically communicated and without even speaking, agreed to put Emilia Perez at number 10. That's done. We can move on now.
It's so funny because I went back and listened to our conversation about that movie not too long ago, and it's like, we definitely didn't like it, but we also were like frustratingly fascinated by its badness in a really interesting way.
We were trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, and it definitely was trying stuff, and I'm a sucker for things that are trying stuff, but no, it was the worst movie of this year, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. All right, number 9. So in my mind, we've got a Wicked situation, because I don't think either of us really jammed with that movie.
Yeah. I think it's safe to put that there, simply because out of the, Wicked and Emilia Perez are the two movies that I just did not like and did not, and have not really changed my mind on since then. I know a lot of people were disappointed at how much we didn't like Wicked, but like I
I'm
just
sorry.
I unfortunately have to stand by. Just like I just did not enjoy myself. I thought it was incredibly slow and boring, and I
Yeah.
didn't think that it was very good. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
sorry.
I think it gets hard from here. Like I think that's done with the easy part because
Yeah,
I think you take those two movies out of the equation and I enjoyed every single one of these movies after this. I think where I'm leaning right now is the movie we just talked about, I'm Still Here Next.
yeah.
Um, not in a way to disparage it, but just merely like I think I liked all these other movies more.
Yeah, I definitely in my head I sort of have the S tier, A tier, B tier thing, and I think I'm Still Here is one of the lower tier. So yeah, I think putting that there is fine. And
Okay. I'm Still
I'll
Here at 8. Okay.
I'll go ahead and suggest that maybe Conclave belongs somewhere along the next slot.
See, I was thinking The Substance next, but
Mhm.
I could be convinced of
I
Conclave.
have those two are in the same tranche for me. So
Okay.
perhaps the substance, and then Conclave, because I think honestly, I probably enjoyed I probably did enjoy Conclave more than the substance. Now that you put it to me,
I had a lot
um,
of fun with The Substance, but as far as like which I think is just a better film, I think Conclave is better.
yeah, me too.
Um, with the exception of the ending, which it's not like I didn't like the ending. It just still kind of baffles me.
Yeah, I was just you're just like okay, right?
Yeah. All right. Now we're getting into it. We've got 5 left. We've got A Complete Unknown, The Brutalist, Nickel Boys, Honora, and Dune Part 2. Um, how are you feeling about Dune Part 2? Like I know you love Dune. I know you love both of these films. Is this a like a you're going to be arguing for this at the top of the list type of thing? Or what's your mind? Where's your mind at right now?
It's definitely very very top tier for me. Um, I will I be arguing to put it in the top slot? I mean, the other way of asking that is there one of these movies that I personally would put above Dune 2?
Mhm.
In terms of enjoyment, no. In terms of ineffable movie quality,
Okay.
I think that there's a case to be made that The Brutalist was a better movie, whatever that means.
Mhm.
I really thought, like, funnily enough, the other Timothy Chalamet movie, I just like I thought it was a masterclass in a number of ways.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you're more hot on A Complete Unknown than I am.
mhm.
Um,
Were you going to put that at number 5? Because
maybe.
because I could also see that's the thing is all 5 of these are so good actually.
Yeah, I mean we're like now we're talking like differences of like the greatest things of all time and how I mean, okay, okay, let's be clear. These films are not like the 5 greatest films of all time. That's not what
Yeah,
I'm saying, but like the differences between each of these 5 on the list are so minute and small to me that it almost doesn't matter,
yeah.
but it's an exercise we have to do anyway.
Well, so here's a little blasphemy is like I'm I'm not gonna put Honora at the top of my list. I don't know about you. I wasn't like shocked and betrayed that it ended up getting Best Picture, but now that I've had some time to kind of cool with all these movies, I definitely liked Dune 2 and The Brutalist and possibly Nickel Boys even more than Honora. Um,
I, the feeling I have on Nickel Boys is that I really was fascinated by it as like a filmmaking exercise of like a trying to push the medium forward into something new and different. If I'm like being honest with like how much I outside of that like loved the movie, I didn't.
yeah.
um
Well,
So
interesting.
I'm not so okay. Let's put all our cards on the table. I am not going to be pushing for like Anora to be number one just because it's the Best Picture winner. Like I loved Anora very very much. I think I'm with you that The Brutalist is a film I enjoyed more. Okay, well let's be clear here. Like I think the act of watching Anora is a delightful joy like experience that I will never forget. I had so much fun with that movie, but like, is it a better film than The Brutalist in my mind? I don't think so.
Mhm.
I'm
So
also acknowledging that The Brutalist was a film that was like literally made for us specifically. So,
right.
um,
So okay, just in the interest of moving the ball a little bit forward, I'm thinking uh, a complete unknown eh, or Nickel Boys for the fifth slot.
I
I'm sort of indifferent as to what order those go in.
I'm gonna put. This is hard. I'm
Do
gonna
you
put
agree
Nickel
that
Boys
those
at
go in
5.
4 and 5?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm gonna put Nickel Boys at 5. I'm gonna put A Complete Unknown at 4. So the problem I have with Dune Part 2 is that it's been a long time since I watched it.
Yeah. And I've watched it like 9 times,
Mm-hmm.
possibly not
Mm-hmm.
exaggerating, because for a while I was flying a bunch and it was just the thing I would put on whenever I flew on a plane.
Okay.
Um, so I've almost watched it to the point of like when you watch a thing too many times and you start to see all the little cuts that you're like, ah, they should have cut that like half a second earlier. It bugs me. So but I think it's fantastic. I think it would be fine. I wouldn't be offended if we did something like Dune Part Two, Honora, and then The Brutalist, something like that. I part of me wants to put Dune Part Two above Honora, honestly. Like I really want to put Dune Part Two above Honora, actually, but I know that maybe you don't feel that way about Dune Part Two.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I think I would put Honora above Dune Part 2, but I that doesn't mean it has to be that way. Like we could compromise. I
we
don't know
can,
what's left. I feel like what we're landing on, just to take all the wind out of our sails, the thing it seems like we're pretty definitive on here is that The Brutalist is going to be in the number 1 slot.
yeah,
Um,
I think so.
which I think is fair. So then it's just a matter of 3 and 2. And honestly, like here, I'll give it to you. Because I know how much the Dune series matters to
It
you.
does matter a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Um, and so Honora will slot at number 3, Dune Part 2 at number 2, and then that means we both kind of our collective agreement pick for number 1 is The Brutalist. Yeah.
Yeah. And I, we didn't talk. This is almost surprising to me for us to be sitting here looking at this, because I don't know that I knew that I was going to put The Brutalist at the top of this list. But now that we're looking at this, I'm like, yeah, I think The Brutalist belongs at the top. Do you feel
Yeah.
comfortable and happy with that?
Yes, I mean, so there's definitely like parts of The Brutalist that I didn't like.
Hmm.
There's parts that surprised me of this is what we're doing with this movie, but it's just one of those movies. Like I just go back to the idea that they made this movie for like nothing, and it looks like one of the most expensive movies ever made. Like it's
Hmm.
just this towering achievement of directing and filmmaking and acting and everything in between. And it also speaks to something I find really fascinating and worth talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, not to take anything away from, gosh, any of the other movies on this list past number 8. Um,
Right.
but but yeah, I feel like, so I mean, this is a fun question. Like when we're talking about which of these movies is the truly the best movie of the year, we're also kind of talking about in 100 years when we're looking back at the Oscars of 2024, like which of these movies will stand the test of time. And it's like it is so often that the best picture winner is not that film
Hmm.
actually. Which isn't just, again, which is nothing to take away from Honora, but I guess the question is, will Honora be remembered in 100 years? I don't know that it will. A
Yeah.
movie I liked a lot. I had a really fun time with it, and I do think it's saying really interesting stuff and shining a light on people that are often ignored by society and just in the stories we tell. The sex workers are often the punchline or the inciting incident, and so rarely the driving force of the narrative. And I think that matters,
Hmm.
sure, but I don't know. And well, maybe it's even unfair to judge it on this criteria, right? Maybe it's unfair to say that like the best movie is the one that will last. Like because that might not necessarily be true. Like because there's all kinds of reasons why a movie becomes like memorable.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's fair or unfair, but I think it's certainly an interesting lens to use.
Yeah.
I think the funny thing now that you put it that way is like even these three top movies, Anora, Dune 2, and The Brutalist, I had my gripes with all three of them.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
we complained about kind of the ending of The Brutalist. I still don't know that it needed to be 3.5 hours long. I think Dune 2, like for all the fact that genuinely love that movie, it's got a few like action sequences in it that I just feel are boring. Um,
Mm.
which like doesn't ruin the movie for me or anything, but I'm just like, I feel like having this scene in this movie is a compromise to the dumb, popcorn eating crowds or whatever, it's like this is not appropriate to be in a Dune movie, and you
Mm.
should have known better, Villeneuve. Um, and it's just it's weird. It's downright. This is my one like rant here, since we didn't really talk about Dune in this series specifically. Is like he gets it so well, but he has to make he has to make it into a commercial movie, and it's not. And I'm not saying that Dune shouldn't have spectacle, because Dune is spectacular in
Mhm.
many ways, but there are like I'm thinking of like the one scene where they're trying to kill the harvester. Nothing about that scene makes sense. If you just watch it and you think about it like tactically, like why are people doing the things they're doing?
Sure.
It makes no sense. It's actually dumb. It's and Dune should never be dumb. So the reason I'm doing this rant is I'm like, even my top tier movies this year, they have stuff in them where I'm like, ugh. And then Nora, we kind of we came away from it very positive, but we had that one period of like where we're like, is it trying to be funny? Because I wasn't laughing. I'm confused. I'm confused about what I'm supposed to feel. I feel like the
Sure.
tone is kind of all over the place. And with the benefit of having some distance from it, I just think we were right that the movie is a little unclear on what tone it's going for at certain times. So all
Yeah.
three of these movies, that none of them are perfect. None of them are Silence of the Lambs or Lord of the Rings or something where it's like you're going to be watching it for your whole life. Um, Dune 2, I might be watching for my whole life, but that's because I'm me. Um,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, being entirely honest, like I don't. Looking at this list, I don't know if I'm ever going to watch any of these movies ever again.
mhm.
And I mean, that's not a bad thing necessarily. I guess that's not true. I'll probably watch Wicked again when my son gets into another Wicked phase. We're
Yeah.
thankfully out of that now.
Uh,
He doesn't want to watch the Wicked Witch anymore. Thank goodness. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with the list. I think the only thing, just looking at it, I'm surprised. Like, I think I probably liked Conclave a little bit better than number 6,
mhm,
but not enough to where I'm gonna like go through the arduous mental exercise of saying, okay, well, which one am I going to knock down for it then?
mhm.
Um, really like to Complete Unknowns. That feels right to me. Honora, Dune, and The Brutalist being the top 3 feels right to me. So yeah, I'm fine with this. So all right, Matt, read the. This is it. We're locking it in. Read our top 10 ranking
All right.
of the best picture for 2024.
Number 10 was Emilia Perez. Number 9 was Wicked. 8 was I'm Still Here, the movie we talked about today. Number 7 was The Substance, followed by number 6, Conclave. Number 5 was Nickel Boys. Number 4 was A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic. Number 3 was Honora, which won Best Picture. Number 2 was Dune Part 2. And number 1 was The Brutalist.
All right, there it is. Curious, those listening out here, if you followed along and have seen every single one of these movies, what would your ranking look like? Is it similar to ours? Is it completely different? I think this is one of those years where I think everyone's rankings will be pretty different. I'm interested to see what those look like.
Yeah.
One more thing before we leave for the week, Matt. I did want to compare this to last year and see which was the better year for movies based solely on the Best Picture nominee for the Academy Awards, which is a stupid thing to measure on, but here we are. So, for just a refresher, here are the nominees for Best Picture for the Oscars last year. We have American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest, a movie that we talked about today. Um, Oppenheimer, of course, being the Best Picture winner from last year, just to remind everyone. So, Matt, looking at this, where's your head at? Which is there a clear favorite arising between these 2 years, or is it something you kind of have to kind of break it down into its composite parts a little bit here?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a knee jerk response. I do have some reactions though, just from that list. If
Okay,
it maybe we can together muddle our way towards something.
sure.
I I immediately had a surprisingly strong reaction when you said American Fiction. I was like, oh, that movie. I love that movie. I forgot about that movie. That
Hmm.
was such a fun movie. I don't know if that was my. I don't know if I don't know if liked it as much when we were talking about it as I like remember now. Right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm like I go through this list in my head and I'm like I remember we had a fun time talking about Anatomy of the Fall, although I don't know if I had a fun time watching it. But go ahead. Yeah.
No, Anatomy of a Fall was one that I think frustrated us,
Mhm.
and I think most of it frustrated me was being like, is the law in France really like this?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Barbie almost like seeped out of the boundaries of the movie and became a thing that like took over the culture and was just like fun um
Yeah, I mean, talking about things that'll be remembered 100 years from now, like Barbie absolutely will.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
The Holdovers was kind of a fun small movie. I didn't think of it much in the last year, to be honest. Killers of the Flower Moon. It's kind of like this movie in some ways, where it's like, oh my god, there's a bunch of painful stuff that actually happened to some people, and it was just awful, just
Hmm.
awful. Um, I also think that was just like a really long and boring movie. Sorry, Maestro. I think I just found painful, like not like oh it was a bad movie, just like once again we're doing like a biopic. It's funny how there are certain parallels, like Maestro sort of paralleling to um, the Bob Dylan movie from this year.
Yeah.
The Bob Dylan movie was much more fun than Maestro.
Yeah.
Maestro, great acting, really great acting. Uh, I remember us being really hung up on like the way they chose to film certain scenes. We'd just be like filming it through a bush. You're
Yeah.
just like, why are we doing it this? I mean, I think I know why we're doing it this way, but it's weird. Um,
Maestro drove me insane. Yeah.
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 Oppenheimer. I th- I think I think that was actually a masterpiece, and I still love that movie.
Hmm. Do you think, like, I mean, obviously pending a lengthy career of many, many more movies, do you think Oppenheimer will be remembered as Chris Nolan's best movie?
um, yeah. I mean, I think up to this point, yes.
Yeah,
I think
like
up to this point,
if God forbid Chris Nolan dies tomorrow,
yeah.
will when we're ranking Chris Nolan, will Oppenheimer be the clear favorite?
Probably. I mean, the weird thing is like if on one level, yes. On another level, if I'm going to sit down with somebody, or if I'm like, oh, you really need to watch, I'm not going to say Oppenheimer. I'm going to say The Prestige, and then that is going to be followed by Memento, and then only after we watch those two am I going to say, okay, and then we should watch Oppenheimer. So it's funny when you start talking about like award shows and like
Hmm.
the best movie. It's like, well, the best movie isn't necessarily the one that I'm going to want to watch or going to want to show people. I just think that's funny and kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's true.
Past Lives is a movie I have not thought about a single time since I watched it, but it's definitely, you know, I liked it.
I haven't thought about Past Lives one since I watched it, but reading the words "Past Lives" on my screen like brings back this flood of emotion
Yeah,
about that film.
right. So, it's the funny thing that happens that makes me glad that we do this podcast, honestly, because I had to sit there and be like, past lives, past lives. What was that about? Oh yeah, and then it like uncorks in your brain and
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, that was amazing actually. Poor Things, I really like. That's another one, kind of like American Fiction, where as soon as I saw the list, and I was like, "Oh Jesus, Poor Things." That was the memorable movie from last year.
I loved that movie. I loved that movie, and I still love that movie.
Me too. That was one where I think we rated it correctly. It was really really good.
Mhm.
Zone of Interest. I mean, we mentioned it a few times in this conversation that we just had because of the parallels. I think in terms of just leaving you with kind of a horrible feeling of just sickness at the depravity of humanity, Zone of Interest hit harder, but
Yeah.
not that these movies are competing, right? Um, anyway, I don't know if that was valuable, but I wanted to refresh myself on how I felt about all of these,
Yeah.
and I think all told, I think I there were no movies from last year that I just like disliked in the way that I disliked a couple of the movies this year.
Yeah.
So I think this year had lower lows than last year. Um,
Yeah. I think that's true. Like I think Maestro was my clear least favorite from
uh,
last year,
uh,
but like comparing Maestro to Emilia Perez is just fucking hilarious
uh,
because it's like one I think is genuinely just a not very good film, and the other is a movie that just didn't work on me very well.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, like I think you're right about Oppenheimer being probably the like the pinnacle of Nolan. And so it just seems to me that if a year has the pinnacle of a director who is one of the better directors working,
Mhm.
then that kind of bumps it ahead. Like I think if like one good exercise is let's look at 2024 and let's look at are there any films on this list that are like what you would say is the film that this director will be remembered for. Like it's almost like a cheat because something like Nickel Boys is like this was his directorial debut. So
Mhm.
like who knows, right? Like this he could go on to make incredible films that continue to push the envelope of filmmaking. Like we just don't know. I
Y-
do not think Dune Part 2 was Denis Villeneuve's like best work. Um
yeah, I think I basically agree. I mean, the guy who directed Anora, um, no,
John
sorry,
Baker.
yeah, this might be his pinnacle. I don't know. I mean, hopefully he goes on and just crushes it from now on. I don't really know.
I think it will be his pinnacle as far as like how many awards he's going to win in a single night
Uh-huh.
at the Academy
Yeah,
Awards since he broke a record that is probably never going to be broken again. I mean, it's tough. I I feel like even of his movies that I've seen, I feel like I liked The Florida Project more than I liked Honora, which is again nothing against Honora at all. I just really really loved The Florida Project. So I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, so okay, so we established lower lows, and then I think one way of getting at this is like if Oppenheimer came out this year instead of last year, Oppenheimer would have won Best Picture this year.
Oh yeah,
I don't feel too. I
no.
don't think Anora would have beat Oppenheimer. I don't see how any of these movies would have beat Oppenheimer. So I think last year. I mean, I think when I say last year, it's funny because you know what,
2023. We're going to go
2020.
with the year the movie came out is going to be our official stance on this whole problem.
Yes, 2023 had higher highs and not as low lows. So I think 2023 was probably a better year. There's also just
Yeah.
the funny fact that like the first two movies we covered this year, we were just like, oh Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think actually looking at this, it's a very clear choice for me. Like, I really, really loved Poor Things. I really,
Mhm.
really loved Past Lives. Really enjoyed Oppenheimer. Really enjoyed The Holdovers. Really enjoyed The Zone of Interest as much as you can enjoy a film like The Zone of Interest. That's 5 of our 10 right there that are like freaking up there.
Yeah.
Um, and I compare it, and it's like, yeah, I like The Brutalist. I liked Honora. I like Dune. I liked A Complete Unknown. But like, I think Killers of the Flower Moon is the most interesting one for me because like that's Scorsese. I love Martin Scorsese. He's one of the greatest directors of all time. I really enjoyed my time with that movie. I I feel nothing about
Yeah.
it right now. I feel absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's the weird. I feel like all of the Scorsese, Leo DiCaprio movies are in this weird space for me personally, where I very rarely empathize with anything that's happening on the screen because they keep doing the thing where Leo stars in them and then he plays a piece of shit
Yeah,
who you hate, and so you're just like, okay, like yes, you like I like it's a well put together movie, but I don't like this.
sure.
So
I would like Martin Scorsese to get back to kind of his higher energy fun movies.
yeah,
Versus like he's obviously right now very interested in doing these kind of sweeping epic, like you look at the last few movies, you have Killers of the Flower Moon, you have The Irishman. These are like he's trying to do this like sweeping epic thing
mhm,
with these movies. And like I love when he does The Wolf of Wall Street.
yeah,
I love, like, speaking of Leo DiCaprio, I love when he does Shutter Island and
right.
stuff like that. Like I mean, yes, Goodfellas is kind of in the middle of those two things because it is kind of this sweet long movie. But yeah,
It- the funny thing about Shutter Island is I think I've seen that movie literally once, and yet and I don't even know that I enjoyed it that much the first time I watched it, and yet in my mind, it is just like a masterpiece, which is just it's just weird how that works for some movies, you know?
sure, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of in consensus here then that 2023 was just a better year for movies than 2024, at least when you're counting the Academy Award
I agree.
nominees
Yep.
for Best Picture.
We
Well,
we
cool.
yeah, we did it.
We did it. Good job, us. And we will find out what 2025 has in store. Do you think there's any movie that is out right now that will be a Best Picture nominee?
Well, statistically, probably yes, but I can't think of any that it would be, so
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm really so one thing I'm really excited about this for this month is um so The Life of Chuck, which is a Mike Flanagan film that premiered at, I believe it was Toronto, and did really really well there and won the audience award at Toronto. And like this is weird, really weird thing there, that always indicates a movie that's going to get nominated for Best Picture,
mm,
like almost always. Uh, but it's usually in the year, like because normally it's like premiering in the year and going to play, whereas The Life of Chuck is not premiering until this June. So like, will it be too far away? I don't know. Just there was a lot of buzz around this movie. It's a Stephen King short story directed by Mike Flanagan. It's very emotional and high concept in some ways. And I just think in the modern Oscars that, you know, love everything everywhere all at once, we got a really good shot at getting Mike Flanagan at the very least a Best Picture nomination this year. I haven't seen the movie, let's be clear. I'm just going off of the buzz that I've heard from people who have seen it.
cool. I mean, that sounds really exciting,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah. And of course, I think the Megan 2.0 movie is coming out this year, so I think obviously front runner.
Yep. Best Picture,
Yeah.
certainly in this household.
All right. Well, that was fun. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. I'm sorry we took so long to wrap up this series, but we finally finished it, and I think we had a good time doing it.
Yep, we had to take our medicine eventually.
Yep. All right, that is all we had for you folks this week. Please let us know, what were your opinions on I'm Still Here, on the Best Picture nominees from 2024, and how it compares to the year prior. Please also, like I said, send us your rankings. If you watched all 10 movies and are interested in ranking them, send them over to us. We want to see them. So you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, on Twitter and Instagram at doofmedia, and over at the subreddit reddit.com/r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, then please go subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms.
And if you haven't gotten enough of us and want to listen to us talk about another movie that we really, really liked, well, this week is the perfect week for it because we have over on our other podcasting feed, Flanagan's Wake, going through the films and television of Mike Flanagan. We this week covered Gerald's Game, Flanagan's adaptation of Stephen King's novel. Really great conversation. Really, really enjoyed that one. I thought we did a good job. I'll pat us on the back for that one, Matt. I think it was one of our better episodes. So please check that out and check out Flanagan's Wake in general if you haven't done that yet.
I am very proud of that episode, yes.
And if you want to support Flanagan's Wake, the Doofcast, or just Matt and I, you can do so over at our Patreon. That is patreon.com/doofmedia. We are, I guess I can tease this. We are in the process of thinking about doing kind of an overhaul of the stuff we're going to get you, which means stuff is coming soon.
That's right.
You want to get on the ground floor of stuff, but also perhaps be grandfathered in on the current stuff.
Yes.
So there's never a better time to do that than right this very minute.
This should be really persuasive to everyone.
Yeah, because we're being very vague, but it's the mystery box. It's Severance.
Exactly. It's the mystery. You don't know. Well, it could be anything.
A boat's a boat.
Yeah.
But the mystery box could be anything.
Exactly.
It could even be a boat.
It could even be a boat. It's not going to be a boat, though. But
no, we're not going to do that.
No.
But anyway, yeah, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. Tons of bonus content and stuff you can see there, and more possibly coming soon.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
Next week on the show, we are doing one of our rare patron-produced episodes. We have a Patreon that really wanted us to watch a movie, and there's a way you can do that over at our Patreon. So they did that, and we are going to be watching, Matt, I'm so excited about this. We're going to be watching Tremors and doing a show on Tremors.
I can't believe we haven't already done a show on Tremors.
Me neither.
I'm so happy.
Me too. So that'll be next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. We'll see you there.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.